Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Yannick from Capricious Publishing in New York. I work with Sophie Morna and Annika Sabin, and we've been really honored to work with Genesis on this book over the last few years. Capricious is a foundation that mostly works with queer photographers, and every now and then we'll do like a poetry book as well. Sorry, let me check my notes really quick. I'm just going to give a little intro for each of our speakers today. Jenny Calivas is an artist based in Los Angeles who works with photography and performance, prioritizing embodied ways of thinking and making. Her recent work consists of performative self-portraits as well as darkroom collages, which investigate issues of agency and gender in relation to photography and to the natural environment. She holds her MFA degree from Yale University and her undergraduate degree from the Evergreen State College. Her photographs are in the permanent collection of the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Museum of Modern Art and have been exhibited both nationally and internationally. An upcoming show with Yancey Richardson Gallery in NYC opens in a few weeks on May 29th, and you can find her recent artist book put out by New Poetics of Labor here at the fair. Lacey Lennon creates photographs and video works that combine elements of performance and documentary to explore ways that sensation and physicality can be expressed in an image. She is currently a 2024-2026 Unseen California Artist in residence at the University of California, Santa Cruz, in partnership with the Kenneth S. Norris Center for Natural History, working on a body of work about high-stakes training and rehearsal in the landscape. She lives and works in Los Angeles and Oakland, California. Genesis Báez is an artist living in Brooklyn, New York. Centering photography, Genesis merges fiction, personal narratives, and social histories of modern colonization in a conversation around placemaking. Her works foreground the material qualities of photography and how they come to reveal our permeability. She has exhibited internationally, most recently at the Whitney Museum of American Art and Kilometro in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her works are also found in the permanent collections of the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, among others. She is currently an Anschutz Distinguished Fellow at Princeton and a 2022 recipient of the Capricious Photo Award, which culminated in the creation of Blue Sun, Sol Azul, published this year. Right after the talk, we'll be doing a signing with Genesis at G12, which is right around the corner, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. It's super exciting to be back in LA with my good friends Lacey Lennon and Jenny Calivas. We know each other from school. We went to graduate school between 2017 and 19-ish. We overlapped a bit there. So it's such an honor to be in conversation with people who really see you and have been a part of your creation journey. So I just want to briefly just kind of present the book, and then we're going to show some images and have a conversation around some themes that we all kind of share in common. May I? Just came out earlier this year. And so, yeah, it's a silkscreen cover. The image is actually a film still. It's a little hard to see here. It's a little dark in here, but when you go outside, it's a little bit clearer. The work has about, I think it's 45 plates and 3 full spreads of film stills as well. Photographs dating as early as 2011 until 2024. Most are from the last 5 years or so, and it was edited by Annika Sabin from Capricious and myself. There are, let's see, there's usually 1 image per page. It's a very slow book. It's big and slow, kind of like me. Some full spread images, and then we have some like full spreads here of video stills. on a different kind of paper. And we have 2 essays in the back, one by El Perez and one by Hilda Llorens, in both Spanish and English. Yeah, so we'll have it here. You guys are welcome to take a look after, and I hope to see you at the signing a little later. But yeah, so today we're actually going to let some of the pictures lead some of the questions that are going to guide our conversation. Lacey, did you want to start with your first question that's related to this image up here titled Sewing Machines and Air?
I can start. Going through this book and thinking about how to engage your work, I was seeing photographs that I had never sort of seen of yours, things that maybe have been in your archive, things that maybe we've made even being in school together or just being in conversation outside over these last few years. And this was one of the pictures that I saw that I had never seen of yours. And it's kind of one of those pictures that to me is just incredibly simple and is could have been a glance that is kind of in a lot of ways pulling or retrieving a photograph out of nothing, and sort of beginning there as a baseline for thinking about making pictures and thinking about your practice more foundationally as one that's incredibly intuitive. And the entire book, is incredibly intuitive. And so I was thinking a lot about that sort of relationship that you have when you're in the space of making pictures, the dynamic between the physical space to eye to sort of psychic space sort of loop that happens. That dynamic is a sort of central tool for making pictures, and I'm curious about how you actually navigate through and feel through that process. What are some ways that you've kind of trained your own intuition, trained yourself to see things, or rather, what are some things that you've unlearned to stop doing to help yourself receive a picture like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, Sandra Perry, during a studio visit, once said to me that absence is not empty, and that's something that's really resonated with me. As you know, some of these images I made during a period of loss, kind of in the aftermath of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. You guys were there with me in school when that happened. So although I wouldn't say the work is about that, certainly a part, right, of my lived experience at during the time of the creation of these pictures. So I was really thinking about how can I make a picture of something that I can't see, right? Can I do that? Is that possible? And in some of these spaces, it felt so full, even if there was a sense of loss or of absence. So that's actually where photography comes into play, because through the actual mechanisms of the camera, the long exposure, its ability to describe a certain kind of light and surface and texture in all of this, I feel like I was able to not just make a trace of what I was seeing, but describe what something felt like, if that makes sense. So for example, in this image, for me, this picture is so much about air. Even though this room is full of metal and all of these heavy things, but you see the string on the sewing machines kind of blowing, you see the blur of the fan, and so the things that we don't necessarily see are still kind of hinted at. I think this is also where I started to tap into the senses and photography as a tool to describe various sensorial experiences beyond vision. Could I make a photograph about humidity or the weight of air? Campy, we were talking about that in your talk, right? How do we describe the weight of something, the weight of air. And is it too much to ask a photograph to do that? Maybe, but yeah, please.
Oh, do I have to turn this on?
No, it's on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting with what you were talking about with this photograph. I
Yeah.
feel like it jumped out to me also when I was spending time with the book, this and a few others, because they felt like very much of the way you see the world, but also like very different pictures to me. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that there's, like, you often picture something like a breeze or something being like activated by, you know, by something, and there's a certain kind of like force and energy that happens. And this picture is so much quieter, and it's still like, I was happy to hear you say that it was about air, because I felt like it very much was for me too, but like the most, like maybe not a breeze. Like it makes me think about, because I can't really tell if the fan's moving or not. I think it, you know, it is moving, but it's not like blowing anything. There's like this, there's kind of like this mask is sitting here precariously, and these different things that might do what your other pictures do, which is like send stuff flying, and this one's just so much more reserved. And I started to notice that in a way that I had never had with your work when I spent time in the book. And it made me wonder, is this, when this picture was made, does it feel like a different direction to you, or?
Oh, yeah, well, actually, that leads me to the second part of Lacey's question, and also your question, which is, how do I tap into intuition? I mean, like, this was a scene, yeah, like, a lot of my images are, like, very performative, and there are, like, people doing things, and, like, the light is very dramatic, and it's, like, heavy, high noon, sunlight, etc. And this feels so much more quiet, and it took me a really long time to trust that this image could reveal something to me. In the moment, I made this by, I liked the string. I like string. I thought it looked beautiful. This is my uncle's studio that he moved from New York City to Puerto Rico. He fabricates awnings. And I was pulled by my curiosity, and that was enough in the moment. I wasn't like, does this make sense? Does this match the other pictures? Is this bad? Is this boring? Maybe a little bit. Like, but, woo! Sorry. But I eventually, you know, had to just like push through all of that insecurity and all of those questions, and then just put myself in a place where I could observe based off of something that was interesting to me or resonated with me, excuse me. And then with time, I start to notice things. It's kind of like a slower reveal. The images reveal things to me that I couldn't see in the moment, partially because photography renders the world in a way that is not visible to our eyes. A camera sees differently than our eyes. So yeah, so the intuition part is very much, the way I harness that is by slowing down and observing and following curiosity and trying to kind of turn some of the thoughts off and trust that something will reveal itself or not, but it'll take me to the next thing. I lost track. Jenny, did that answer what you were part of what you were?
It's exciting to me, and all of those details that, you know, there's so many details and kind of layers to this image that indicate some like power and electricity and wind and all of these kind of forces that are sort of turned off. And I love that like potential in it. And then also I noticed the mask hanging, and I started to notice this feeling of like protection that I had never noticed throughout your images. I think we're going to get to some later, and I'd like to talk about that because
Yeah, for sure.
It's something I had never noticed before.
Absolutely. Jenny, this was one of the images that you brought up Do you have a specific question around this one, or?
Well, I have a question that I wrote to you that
Yeah.
doesn't exactly align with this image, but I think maybe there's stuff, like I just selected the images I was curious about and wanted to learn about. So this is another one that was like surprising for kind of a similar reason. And I actually saw this when it was on exhibition in New York, and I was like, I don't think I've even talked to you about this, but I was just like floored by it. And yeah, I wonder actually, instead of me talking about my thoughts, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. This was also one of those pictures that I made and didn't trust in the moment, and didn't, I couldn't see it for what it was until years later. Like, does that ever happen to you guys? Like, you have this idea of like, I'm gonna make this art about like inheritance and place, and like if I put this here and here, it creates a tension that resonates with how it was like very predetermined. And that wasn't the case here. I like looked at the image and I was like, this has nothing to do with how I was feeling in the moment. Boo, failure, right? And then I left it in the archive for years. And then when making the book, I could see it and interpret it for what it was and for what it was doing, as opposed to whatever expectation I put on it. I think a lot about collage, even though I don't usually collage in like a physical sense of like cutting up paper and bringing together disparate images, but I think of collage can also be a form of composition, right? And bringing disparate planes of space into one plane of space. And I also think of collage as like a diasporic site, right? Like this kind of like fragmentation, dispersion, kind of still operating in dialogue with each other. So what you're looking at here is a mirror like hung on a wall, and a bowl of water that's projecting the light bulb that is on, but that you can't see in the picture. And then behind that is a photograph of a person that's been turned cyan with time. And it's called Sound is Also a Wave. Yeah, I think similar to the other one, I was kind of struck by how presence can be like conjured in an image without having a person in it.
Yeah, and there's kind of like, I feel like sort of a denial, more of a denial to the viewer than there is in most of your other images, which I think are like generally very powerful and generous. This feels like a little bit more holding back, and I think it really asks me to like enter it and think about it in a way, even though it's so flat. There's like, it's all happening within like this much space.
Yeah, totally. A very small spot.
And like this, there's no reflection in the mirror. Like that's the one thing that should be like, or everything, like there's no sound, obviously it's a photograph, but there's no reflection happening in the mirror.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I was standing. I'm like, where am I?
Yeah, I love that about it.
And this radio comes up. This radio is like a little motif throughout the book. It comes out in various images. And actually, speaking of sound, I
have a question about that picture. I have a question about the whole back and forth that just happened also, too, because, I was sitting here and I was thinking about and I've heard this story before about how you started preparing the book. I don't know if you want me to say this, but you had like 6 pictures that you were thinking about, and you had to like pull out your archives because
I was like, I only like 6 pictures that I've ever made. I have to make a book.
And I guess I was like curious about like, even going back to the, earlier question about intuition and sensation, like, and seeing this picture, which I also have never seen before of yours, like, what did the book kind of force you to learn about yourself as an artist, and these ways and these, these feeling through things, like these ways, like what did the book kind of even tell you about periods of your life that maybe you were kind of like, I don't want to say not blind to, but like, you had not yet really had conscious thoughts about, like.
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, it's almost like I couldn't hear so many of the pictures. It was like a certain pitch I wasn't like that I couldn't hear yet or something. Yeah, you know, I think when I saw them all laid out, Yannick might remember this, like laying everything out in Sophie's apartment on the ground, and then like picking up on different motifs was quite interesting. I think one thing I really learned is how malleable pictures are, which I always kind of knew, right? Pictures are such a part of our lives that like we kind of know that, but I really understood it in a deep way when all of a sudden we laid out dozens and dozens, hundreds of printouts on the floor, and the pictures started to like quite literally morph before my eyes. Like, oh my God, when I put this quiet picture with no people, you know, this still life next to this portrait of this elaborate performance, suddenly things change, right? Like pictures gain and lose meaning depending on their context. Making the book made me realize that like not every image has to kind of hit or sound the same way. Keep using all these sound analogies, but it's kind of the only thing that makes sense in my head. Like if this were a song, like not all of them have to have like the same sound or the same note. Like some things can be quieter, and actually you need that in order to really kind of like see and be with the other ones. So I just found a new appreciation for it. And I honestly, part of it was like being in school and like being afraid of like fucking up and of failure, you know, and of like making a picture that's like quote unquote not good, like whatever that means, to the point where I like forgot to be open to things that maybe were outside of my intentions, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made this book. Like, and so that we could all spend more time with those images also that you had maybe not given attention to, because they're, I mean, I've known your work for like, I guess we met in 2015.
Yeah, 10 years
so,
now.
yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just like spending time with the book. It's amazing to see all the different ways that you articulate yourself. And this being one version of that, that's I think unexpected.
Yeah, it's important to like get out of your own way sometimes, you know, like put whatever expectation you had like aside and just like be with whatever you made, like let it reveal itself to you over time. I wanted to just mention along those lines, Justine Kurland said about this, about my work, but in relation to this picture specifically, that the camera points more like an ear instead of an index finger in the direction of what can be felt. And I was like, there we have the radio, all the ears, all the whispering, all those are also motifs. Like in the book, there are lots of like images of like sound or people making sound or people like speaking or whispering or listening to each other. And again, in the moment, that's not something that I was super conscious of, but just because you don't have like the words and the language doesn't mean that it's not significant. Like there's so many different ways of knowing. And so that's also another thing, like getting out of, like trusting that it's okay to not have words or words yet, that there are some photographs exist in a place beyond words or in between words. And that's important.
That also, just really quick, makes me, like what you just shared that Justine had said about the image being, like coming from a place of hearing more than pointing, is, I think, as Justine is able to do, is just so perceptive, because I feel like that has to do with what we've talked about, and maybe we'll get to later, but with time also. Like there's such a pause in your work where I feel like I'm like brought to like a different register, and that idea of like being there to hear hear something and kind of absorb it,
Yeah.
rather than see it almost. Like it
Yeah.
feels more like hearing in a way,
Yeah.
where it's like absorbing.
Yeah, absorbing. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's really I think
Mhm.
a amazing way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting image in regards to time, but that also has so much to do with performance, which is also a part of my work. So there's this like, I would say this like component of like the senses and being led through feeling rather than ideas or the English language, words of the English language, right? Like there are other ways of knowing, and to initiate a picture. And then there's this element of performance. I'm in a lot of the photographs, which isn't always obvious.
There's also a particular kind of like texture of performance. Like it's staged in a really kind of particular way. It has a feeling. It's kind of overt, but it's also like possibly happening already. I'm really curious about like that as a mechanism and how you set up this like flavor of performance or staging, because there's so many realms of staging in photography. And I'm curious about how you would describe the flavor of staging and how you even go about asking people to perform in these scenarios and contexts. Because when I look at some of these photographs, I'm like, they're family, they're people, or they could potentially be neighbors, even bordering on actors, friends of friends. They both fall into gestures that they know well within their bodies, but then they also enhance and heighten something, and I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so the people that you see in the book, some are me, some are my mother, some are friends and other family members, and some are, actually, are there any in the book where there are actors? I have worked in, yeah, and some are people that I've cast, actually. So I work in a range, but there's a certain type of slowness and consent that is important to me, more so just because for me it is just very generative, to like work with someone who wants to be photographed and wants to make something with me. I often start with a gesture that gets repeated over and over and over again for the camera. So I have a little remote. Sometimes this was made with before I got on the remote train, so it was auto timer. So I kept like running back and forth. It was very inefficient, but then I got a remote and would just start kind of pressing the button and repeating a gesture over and over and over again. I didn't know what things looked like, and what's interesting is that, one of the things I want to really say about these images of the performance is that they're at the end, they're very much about photography and not about the performance, because the act of photographing the performance, this gesture, the framing, the lighting, the depth of field, the lines, everything creates something totally different and new from what was happening for me. Does that make sense?
I feel like you need the edge of the frame so
Yes.
much in this photograph,
Yes.
for there to be a feeling of something happening
Exactly.
beyond, you know?
Exactly. Because that gaze, I'm gonna spoil it for you, which looks of like, oh my God, this like impending thing was actually like our friend driving around the block being like, oh, what are you guys doing? You know, so I am very much interested in how a photograph, you know, the frame, the camera can transform like what is around us, or a gesture.
And then making that happen, or conducting it, or doing it, or staging it in an environment where that kind of like chance can, like, you know, where I don't even know what this person, what
Yeah.
they rode by, and interject into that and
Yeah, it's
leave
also
it very different.
it's also a way of working with chance. If I give myself parameters, we're working in this place, or we're gonna repeat this gesture at this corner for 7 minutes, go. And then, it's enough structure so that we can like then improvise and for things to emerge.
Can I ask something about this before you go on?
Please.
This is your mom, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind me saying that?
No.
Sorry. Okay.
No.
It sounded
It's
like
no.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I was just thinking about throughout the book, there's this heavy subject matter of a matrilineal kind of lineage and women. There's so few men in the book. I'm really, like I said to you through text, like I'm very curious about the few times that men appear. But I would just love to hear you talk about, I guess like one question that came up for me when I was looking at it and spending time with it was like what the, I guess if you feel like there's an expression of a bond that you have with your family members that are women and beyond that in your community, or if you feel like there's also a kind of utopian quality, especially where it kind of like leaves men out to a large extent. I would just love to hear about the kind of balance, or maybe I'm like looking into it wrongly to see this utopian side.
No,
but I'm really
that's
curious
right.
about that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think I wanted to center Puerto Rican women in this book because I've never seen something that centers Puerto Rican women ever in my life in this way, like images of. And so there's that. There's also one of the ways in which I think about it, and it's not they're not a symbol or a metaphor. These are people and depictions of real people and real things. But one of the ways I think about like my relationship to my mother and to these women that are depicted is also like having inherited a relationship to the Caribbean and to Puerto Rico, and having inherited like history and a relationship to place through these people. These are the people who brought me back there. These are the people who raised me there. These are the people who like protected me, right? So yeah, I see them as these kind of like, the people who like gave me this gift of this like relationship to this place, and also like wanting to center the importance of like matriarchal kinship systems in Puerto Rico, which is a incredibly patriarchal society, where people really depend on like other systems of support. And also it's also just very much like working with my lived experience of like, to put it plainly. There's more I have to say about that will emerge in, I think, but I think that's why I'm drawn to them. So I just want to say something really, really quickly before we move on, and I want to be mindful of time, is that this image, speaking of time, departure, rehearsal, both the rehearsal being something that both of you think about conceptually. This gesture was rooted in like a desire and a memory, and then it was performed over and over again. So it's a way of like flattening time. Like we're performing the past, but then it gets transformed through the camera, and then we meet it in a future. And then there are images like this, which are really different, where I am performing with a prop and using objects and materials to activate the environment in this, or to like or to access something that I can't necessarily see. There was light bouncing all around off of this river. I couldn't see that. But when I placed this white fabric, you know, it was able to like make a trace. So yeah, so sometimes I am just kind of like working with props, and sometimes just working with people. And then other times the performance, you know, there are no people, but this was a product of kicking silt and like moving, like silt as I intentionally like walked across a body of water.
I should have looked. I feel like I shouldn't be saying this because I'm going to butcher it, but for some reason I'm going to. If anyone knows, please correct me. But there's this like Buddhist cone, I guess it's called, where it's something like we see wind when it passes through the leaves of a tree. And I feel that so much with what you're talking about, the way that you're like activating these materials and yeah.
Totally. So I just want to be mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes before we pause and open it up to some questions. But Lacey Lennon.
Of relating to place and time. And on the subject of time, I do want to go back to that really quickly. Because when I was thinking about place and time, as you were sort of talking about these matrilineal relationships and like holding together, and when you said it, support systems and how things just come together to support and hold, and I don't know who's an aunt, who's a cousin, who's a mother, who's a sister, who's what, who's a friend, who's a neighbor, and it doesn't matter also. That same sort of unknowing or unplaceableness is like, makes me think about how place feels so ambiguous in all of this work, and how I was thinking about place just really feels held in your body as an artist. Yes. And that place is, what did I say? It doesn't feel grounded in any one particular location. Place feels of the mind and spirit. It's sort of psychic space, and it traverses across these sort of different landscapes. And I was really curious if you could just talk about place and speed in that way, and movement. And because even though you're mentioning Puerto Rico, like it still feels like a Puerto Rico that is not defined by particulars of like Puerto Rico or Massachusetts. Like there's like, you know, you can see that little sliver of a New England house on the side in that one photograph. You know, you see the trees, there's water. But place is very much in your body in a way, I think. And if you could talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this work is, I would say, not about Puerto Rico, which some people like. Let's just clear that up right here while we're all here. You know, it's really an easy way, right, for people to kind of pigeonhole you. I would say most of the pictures in the book are not made in Puerto Rico, but are rather, Puerto Rico is a place that has touched me. It has left a deep imprint on my spirit and has shaped how I see the world. It has cultivated a deep sense of compassion and empathy and like awareness for what is possible on the edges of things, and has taught me how to perceive magic. And so rather than photographing that place, going to that place and photographing it, which I used to do, and which there are pictures in here that are made there, it is more about kind of seeing the world, it's more about maybe like describing a sense of being of both places, all places, and nowhere at the same time. And a lot of these pictures were made, I would say, from like a sensibility that was imprinted on me from spending time in this place. Everything from like the way I notice light to the way I like play and, you know, explore things, or my relationships to people and attention to care and protection and feminism, really, which is where I learned it. It's my mom and I watering the backyard, new trees, closed down public school in the back, shut after 2017. This one's called Watering Time. I'm holding the water as well as the shutter release. And then, oh my God, there's too much to talk about. But yeah, like place, not just existing inside of you, but like being impacted or shaped by a place and by an experience of a place. And that then kind of, you know, leading or shaping how you kind of like lead a life. This picture is interesting because I, unlike some of the others that are so performance-based, this was just me receiving in a different way of just kind of like being honored to be let into this very intimate space with my big-ass camera on a tripod. That is a gift. But then just to kind of wrap up here a bit, I wanted to kind of finish answering your question, Lacey, with what Jenny has said before about permeability and this kind of and place appearing in the images also as this kind of like shape shifting energy, or like here you're seeing milkweed seeds in a note that were brought to me. And then this like depth of field kind of turning the background of the image into almost like a part of the foreground. And like photography as a way, or like the camera and everything about the camera, the frame, the depth of field, perspective, all of this allowing us to describe a type of permeability like between multiple spaces and places and planes. And this is sand that has been moved around from the coming and going of waves to form a kind of figure. Jenny, this one's for you.
I love to see what happened in that picture with the
Yeah. Yeah. And permeability of places not fixed. And I would say that kind of like underlines a lot of the pictures all over. God, there's so much. I could be here for a long time.
There's so many layers to your work. It's like almost hard to know how to approach it. Like there's so much happening all at once. It's really incredible.
Thank you guys for your questions. I'd love to open it up to if anyone has like a question or a comment. Would love to hear, but no pressure. Thank you.
Hello. I would like to go back to something you said in the beginning. You talked about how you let the word kind of reveal themselves afterward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really intrigued with the idea, because when I looked at the photographs, they still feel very resolved in a way. They feel standalone. They feel like you put a lot of thoughts into these work, each individual photographs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of wondering, what is that balance, like, how letting even though you're letting the work to reveal themselves, giving them time to resonate afterwards, but then how important it is in that moment, taking the photographs, how resolved they have to be. Because I'm also thinking about like, because they don't look snapshot, like we could be taking 10,000 snapshots and then later on looking back at them like, oh wait, I see something revealing like happening. But then in comparison, your work, you're more talking about these very complete pictures too. So kind of wondering, how do you see the difference between the two kind of methods, or like how important it is these work are a lot of time?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that one way to think about it is that I try to be, and this is so much easier said than done, my God, but I try to really separate creation and analysis. Those are two different processes. And so, I will arrive in a place, I will set my parameters. This studio, because I'm interested in string and the sewing machines, and the string comes up in all my pictures, and like these sewing machines are beautiful, and the light, and wow, right? Like a very kind of fun, like a curiosity and desire that kind of goes beyond words. That's just like hard to explain, right? So I like follow that. And then I have to then turn my brain off, or a part of my brain off, and then focus on creation. And that's where like another level of like pleasure comes in, like just like savoring like the lines, the shapes, the light, like, like really kind of leaning into just like shaping something and making something, and not necessarily like worrying about like what does this mean or do, right? And then what happens is like later in time when I lay things out, I pick up on things that I couldn't necessarily put words to in the moment, but perhaps was there just like underneath a certain kind of layer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In the moment, it's more about the playing. You have what was kind of important to you. You put them inside of the frame, but then just playing with them, not really thinking about what's gonna come out of them afterwards until later.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't I wish I could just I don't know, roll up to like a random mechanic shop and like set up my tripod or something and just make a picture. I can't. I have to be led by something that feels meaningful to me, that touches me in a way that I may not necessarily have words for, but I just feel a gravitational pull to a thing, and then that's enough. And then I get in and then I play.
Yeah. No. Thank you for that.
Or I try. Joey? Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm curious, you might not be able to answer this question yet, but I'm curious how the process of making this book has changed the way that you photograph, or, yeah.
Oh my God, yes. Such an education in photography, this book. I feel lighter and looser and less hard on myself. I feel kinder with myself, because I know that oh, I don't know what this, if I'm out there with my camera, this picture of leaves, I don't know, I don't know if this means anything. But now I'm wait a minute, you don't need to know right now, because later it'll probably reveal something to you that you can't see yet, right? Or it might be really important to another photograph or in a sequence. So get out of the way. It's free, it's digital photography. Just make the picture, and then, so I'm already feeling that shift. Thank God. Because the voices in there are mean, or can be. Thank you. Sasha. Hi, Sasha. You're in LA.
I came just for this. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was so wonderful to see. What you had to say about the work was so great, but I also thought, Lacey and Jenny, the way that you peeled the onion was really amazing. And one of the things that struck me that was so fascinating was this idea of place, it being a geographic place, but then that geography not translating necessarily into cultural specificity in the pictures, but rather something elemental. And I think that's really fascinating. I mean, as someone who has also spent time trying to think about a place that I'm from, but that's far away, for me, my instinct has always been to be about that kind of things of the world. But in your case, and it's in the titles, things like weather or water or sky. So I'm just curious to hear how you've come to interpret this place through these kind of larger systems and almost philosophical systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I think about the elements, they kind of remind me that, like the elements have no regard for these arbitrary borders that we created. Like the clouds are just going to keep moving like across all these borders and across the seas, and like the earth gets like picked up and like brought as sand clouds elsewhere. And so there's something about like the elements kind of implying a certain type of like movement, like a perpetual movement and permeability that feels important to my ideas. And also they're everywhere. So it's also like, wait, these are my materials and I can access them in a lot of different places. And so I don't need to like get on a plane and put the place in front of the camera in order to make a picture about what it feels like to be in relation to a certain place, right? So there's also like it facilitates a type of creative freedom, I think. But I think the main thing for centering the elements, aside from being a Taurus, if that means anything to anyone in here, is like the perpetual kind of like movement and shape shifting of water, of the earth, of the air, and of light, and like photography also being like so connected to that. I think we have time for one more Gladys, is it time or should we have one more question? One more question. Yeah, hi. Is there a microphone we can pass down? I'll stick around too, like if anyone, like we can go like talk outside. Oh, we have microphone. Sorry.
I'm curious, after you experienced the bookmaking process and you became a little less precious about your images, seemingly, if the 6 images that you were so precious about at the beginning even made it in the book? Oh my God.
Yeah, because I am like just still a little too uptight. There was this like one image where the Annika was like, maybe this doesn't. I was like, absolutely not. Yes, they're still in there, but they don't weigh the same.
Yeah, that's cool.
They have a different weight. They shift. They're shape shifting. Thank you all so much. It means a lot to share with you. Yeah, I'll be out there. If anyone wants to like chill, hang out, I'll be in the seating area. Thank you for coming. Oh no, wait, I won't be. I'll be signing the books at the booth. Just kidding. Come to the booth. Where is it? D what? G12. G12. See you. Thank you, Lacey. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everyone on the live stream.